You hear a song you have not played in years, and for a moment, an entire period of your life returns with it. The room you used to sit in, the people you talked to, the strange websites you visited when the internet still felt like somewhere you could explore. Seen from the present, that whole period feels warmer, simpler, more alive. Yet the period itself probably contained plenty of ordinary afternoons, slow days, awkward conversations, problems that seemed enormous at the time. You may have been waiting to grow up, leave that job, finish school, move somewhere else, or finally understand what you were doing with your life. If that period was so perfect, why were you so often waiting for something to change? Maybe the past did not change, but what your memory gives back to you did. Welcome to Human Watching. Today we are looking at why the past can feel better in memory than it felt while we were actually living it. Living through a period and later looking back on it are not the same psychological experience. The present arrives in high resolution. You experience the tired morning, the delayed train, the message nobody answers, the minor disagreement, the afternoon that refuses to end. You carry unfinished tasks, uncertain plans, and dozens of concerns too unimportant to become lasting memories, but important enough to affect your day. Memory does not preserve all of this as a continuous recording. When you remember a period from years ago, your mind reconstructs it from whatever remains accessible: particular scenes, general knowledge, familiar emotions, photographs, stories you have repeated, and the meaning that period acquired later. This does not mean the memory is fabricated. It means that an entire year may eventually be represented by a remarkably small collection of moments. A childhood summer becomes one bicycle ride, the sound of an old television, and a few evenings when everyone seemed to be together. What usually disappears is not necessarily some hidden catastrophe. It is often the enormous amount of ordinary friction surrounding those moments. The heat that made it impossible to sleep, the mosquitoes, the argument before the photograph, the week when nothing interesting happened. You remember the summer. You rarely remember its Tuesdays. As details become less accessible, the surviving scenes must represent more than they originally did. One evening can gradually become the emotional symbol of an entire friendship. One song can seem to contain a whole decade. The present receives no such compression. It includes every uneventful hour as you experience it. So the comparison is already uneven. The full texture of today against a small collection of scenes from years ago. But compression alone does not make a memory warmer. Something may also change in the way those surviving scenes feel. Imagine a holiday that contains bad weather, delays, expensive meals, and at least one argument over something nobody will remember clearly. During the trip, these problems are real. They affect your mood and occupy your attention. Months later, you may describe the same holiday as wonderful. Researchers have observed this kind of rosy retrospection in certain experiences. People do not always evaluate an event in the same way before it happens, while it is happening, and after it is over. Part of the explanation may involve what psychologists call the fading affect bias. Over time, the emotional intensity associated with negative autobiographical events often fades faster than the intensity associated with positive ones. The negative event does not have to disappear. You may remember the rain, the delay, or the argument perfectly well, but remembering it is no longer emotionally equivalent to standing in the middle of it. The argument remains in the story. It simply stops occupying the whole room.
Positive memories can retain more of their warmth, while many temporary frustrations lose the immediacy they had when their consequences were still unresolved. This is a tendency, not a universal cleaning system for the mind. Severe, repeated, or traumatic experiences cannot be casually placed in the same category. Some painful memories remain intense, and some people experience this pattern very differently. Nostalgia is also not pure happiness. A memory can feel comforting and painful at the same time. In fact, part of its emotional force may come from knowing that the moment cannot happen in quite the same way again. We are not simply deleting sadness and keeping joy. With distance, the relative emotional weight of what remains can change. And time is not the only editor. Every memory is being opened by someone, and that someone is no longer exactly the person who lived it. A memory may concern the past, but it is reconstructed in the present. The person you are today influences which scenes become accessible and what those scenes appear to mean. When your current job feels exhausting, an earlier workplace may suddenly seem relaxed and full of possibility. You remember the colleagues you liked and the sense of familiarity. The reasons you wanted to leave may remain as facts, but become harder to feel. When a current relationship is uncertain, an earlier relationship may appear unusually clear and effortless. That does not prove the old job or relationship was secretly terrible. It may genuinely have contained something valuable that is missing now, but the comparison is not neutral. Your present situation is helping to determine which version of the past enters the room. The same thing happens with identity. Certain memories survive because they help explain something about the person you believe you have become. Your first apartment may no longer represent bad plumbing and unpaid bills. It represents independence. An old online community may represent a time when connection felt spontaneous. A particular song may represent the first period when your inner life seemed entirely your own. The meaning is real, but it was not necessarily present in its finished form when the event occurred. Some of it was added later, once you knew what the experience had led to. And sometimes what you miss is not simply the place, the technology, or the people. You miss the version of yourself who existed around them. The person with fewer responsibilities, the person encountering certain experiences for the first time, the person who still assumed some friendships would remain unchanged. You do not only miss those Saturday afternoons, you may miss being someone for whom they seemed endless. This does not make nostalgia dishonest. Events acquire new significance as they become part of a larger life story. But it does mean that remembering is partly an act of interpretation. This contrast does not work as a universal filter that turns everything golden. A difficult present can brighten a related past, but a negative state of mind can also make painful memories more accessible. The past you retrieve depends partly on the question your present is asking, and the present is competing at one final disadvantage. It does not yet have an ending.
When you think about an earlier period, you know what happened next. You know which friendships survived, which problems disappeared, which decisions mattered, which fears never came true. But the person living through that period knew none of this. They did not know whether the relationship would last, whether moving away was a mistake, or whether the problem consuming their attention would still matter a year later. From where you stand now, much of that uncertainty is difficult to reconstruct. Once an outcome is known, the path leading toward it can appear more obvious and coherent than it originally was. The abandoned possibilities fade from view. Events that once felt disconnected become chapters in a story. The past feels simpler, partly because it no longer contains a future. The present contains far too much future. Every unresolved problem still has several possible endings. Every decision can still become a mistake. Minor inconveniences have not yet revealed whether they are meaningless or the beginning of something larger. You are not watching a finished story. You are standing inside all the footage that might eventually become one. This is why describing memory as a highlight reel is not quite accurate. A remembered past may still contain grief, conflict, embarrassment, and failure. But these scenes now exist within a more compressed structure whose ending is already known. They have consequences, they have context, they lead somewhere. The present is still raw footage, repetitive sequences, unclear motivations, loose ends, and several possible endings competing at once. The past has already become a finished cut.
So when that old song begins, it does not open a perfect archive of another time. It activates the scenes that survived. Around them are details that disappeared, emotions whose intensity changed, meanings added by the person you became, and the retrospective clarity of already knowing how the story ends. None of this proves that the past was not genuinely better in some ways. Perhaps that friendship really was extraordinary. Perhaps a community disappeared. Perhaps an earlier stage of life contained more freedom, novelty, or time. Perhaps the internet actually encouraged a different kind of experience. Understanding memory does not erase real change. It explains why even a genuinely good period can become more uniformly warm, clear, and complete in retrospect than it ever felt from inside. We do not compare the present with the past under equal conditions. We compare the unfinished, moment-by-moment experience of today with a version of yesterday that has already been selected, compressed, interpreted, and given an ending. The past does not always become better. It becomes easier to hold as a story. The present still arrives one unresolved moment at a time. That old song is not only bringing back what happened, it is bringing back the finished cut your memory has made from it, and the person you were as seen by the person you have become. For more explorations of the strange forces shaping human behavior, subscribe to Human Watching. It really helps the channel.